G'day guys, welcome to the first of many reviews or postmortems, if you want to call it that, after a loss. Hopefully not too many postmortems. For season 2024, just here to have a bit of a look at yesterday's 17-point loss to the Cats in match sim at Icon Park in dreadful conditions. Let's not beat around the bush, although it's not unusual to get that type of weather in the final series. I mean, I think 2 out of the last 10 grand finals have been over 30 degrees. Not that you're going to get that extreme conditions, but last year's grand final was fucking hot. So it's not like you can just ignore it in the season proper, particularly at the business end. But in saying that, I mean, you can only imagine how difficult it must have been to be out there with the heat and also the wind on top of that. I don't know. I didn't watch it live and I had no real desire to go to the game. I mean, I had to work, but, I could have taken the day off and gone along and watched and been there live, but I had no desire. And I certainly wasn't in any sort of rush to get home and watch it. I followed a little bit on social media throughout, but I was pretty busy yesterday. Finally got around to watching the game at around about 8:30 last night. And like many things, I thoroughly enjoy watching football. And I like to have a look at, I suppose what I'm looking at here is, are we doing anything differently than what we did in 2024? Because I think we can all agree that Vossi coming into his third season at the football club, and there's not a lot of wriggle room here because we made a prelim final, but we will need to keep evolving and improving. And we should be better this year, or we expect to be better this year. I think we demand to be better. I think that's another thing as well. But if we dished up what we did yesterday in some match sim, and what I mean by dished up, I think there were parts of that game where we were okay, and I liked a few things from that game, but there was a lot of sort of bad. If we take that into round one against the Brisbane Lions, where the mistakes, then they will take us to the cleaners. It's going to be a very, very difficult task against Brisbane. And we're not going to be, let's face it, we're not going to be at full strength. And I hear the things, look, Geelong were at full strength yesterday and we weren't, and they played all these players and we didn't. Well, we're not going to be at full strength when we take on the Brisbane. So we're going to have to deal with that. So I'm not using that as an excuse going into round one. It's going to be extremely difficult. We need to be better. And how are we going to get better is the sort of things I'm looking at. And I'm seeing, look, I've got to be honest, I'm seeing the growth. I'm seeing against a really system-based football team, which I see Geelong, and they've had their coach, Chris Scott, for such a long time now, that they've had practice. And even though they have a lot of young players coming through that team now, they are developed superbly at VFL level. It's well aligned, the way they develop their players into the system. And if I think the one criticism with us yesterday, and this is not the result, is that I just felt that Geelong, they looked the better team to me. They looked the more system-based team. And that's on the back of, I think, not necessarily because they've been together for such a long time. It's because they have better users, better skilled players. And I think the biggest criticism from our team is that, have we necessarily improved our overall skill? And we're just going to have to wait for that. I don't think you can base it on the back of yesterday's performance, but there were a lot of mistakes. But the better teams, the better skilled teams in extreme conditions, whether it's wet or it's hot, are able to adapt and are able to adapt to the conditions better than, say, a team that is not. And I think still we are that identifiable team. Our identifiable system is still pretty much contest based, and the positive out of yesterday is that game, as far as I'm understand, was set up by the clubs. You didn't have to have that match sim. So Carlton have obviously organised with Geelong and maybe through Brian Cook and the connection with Brian Cook that will play the Cats. And not for 1 second in that game did I wouldn't say it was bruise free, but I just think we are such a brutal team at the contest. I didn't think we necessarily brought that with a hell of a lot of gusto to the game, whereas the Cats are a little bit different. I'm not saying they're an outside team, but they rely on really, really good foot skills to really pierce the opposition open. And I thought they did that at times yesterday. And none, I suppose, more highlighted by we dominated the first 9 minutes of the game. We kicked a couple of goals and a couple of behinds, and we controlled territory. There's that word, territory, but we did. We controlled field position and territory. There's those two words that I don't necessarily like, but we did. And it almost felt like Geelong didn't have an inside 50 for the first 10 minutes. Then all of a sudden they went bang. It was the one kick by Tom Stewart through the middle of the ground. It was just an amazing kick off one step and opened up the whole ground, and they went bang, 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 got the ball inside 450. And then they just kicked 5 unanswered goals. And it just sort of brought me back to last year's prelim final. And I don't want to compare a match sim in February, okay, to the prelim final, but there was something sort of eerily similar about that. And I don't want that to become a trend with our football team, that we dominate periods of the game like we did yesterday, and then all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, it's gone. The score's gone and the opposition are in front. And then we, as my thumbnail suggests, we are then chasing tail. So what does it all mean yesterday? Look, I think from a positive point of view, I can see what we're trying to do, and that is move the ball a lot quicker from our back half and have a similar, I suppose, style to which Geelong do, and that is to move the ball quickly and with efficiency through the corridor, which I thought we did yesterday better than I've ever seen, but still we are that team that can cough it up in really dangerous spots. And I think 4 out of their 5 goals, which I counted, came from either mistakes or turnovers. I liked the games of McGovern. I thought he was exceptional. And I know their tools got away a little bit at times, but they're going to be without Jacob Wiedering at the moment. That's just something we're going to have to deal with. And that is a concern going into round 1 against Brisbane. Not so much against the Tigers, but if they get Tom Lynch back and they've got Kajiski and also Bolter down there, they're really going to stretch us. But I thought McGovern was really good at reading the cues, and I thought he was kicking was sensational. I really do. And we need he's going to go to another level because we see what the likes of Jeremy Howe can do for the Pies, and we can see what Tom Stewart does for the Cats. And I think every sort of team that's been successful have had those sort of quarterbacks who are exceptional by foot. And there's no doubt the club are really investing a lot in Jordan Boyd. And I had him in my top 15 in the ranking, and I'm going to stand by that. I think that the biggest concern for me with Jordan is whether he is a good enough player. I mean, he's got exceptional foot skills, and I thought he played really well yesterday, but is he a good enough player? We're soon going to find out with that. But I thought he used the ball really well yesterday. He defends really strongly as well. I thought Adam Saab was good as that other sort of smallish defender. And it's going to be interesting to see how we work Zach Williams into that mix when he's due to come back. I am still, without Sam Walsh, who, when does he come back? We're not quite sure. Where does our real zip come from in the midfield? Did we really push ourselves yesterday through the midfield with our contest work? I don't think we did. I don't think Cripper really got out of second gear young Bose from Geelong, not that he's young anymore, was like wrestling him at the contest, and Cripper was just sort of like, yeah, so be it. We'll wait till round one before the real stuff happens. But where's our zip going to come from? Certainly not going to come from Hewitt, who I thought was okay yesterday. Chera was good yesterday, serviceable. Cripper serviceable. But where's that next layer of speed and pace going to come from? Is it going to come from Ollie Hollands, who spent a little bit of time in the midfield, spent a couple of times at centre bounces, and I thought he was outstanding. And really outshone his older brother, who I thought was okay in his first game. I'll get to the new guys shortly, but there is something that the club are going to work with, I think, because he's going to give you a really honest contest, but his speed and his running ability, and to get Sam Walsh back into that mix as well, could he be the spark that we've been lacking through that midfield? Because we know we're strong. We know we're very strong at the contest, but not necessarily we had that zip on the outside. I would just love Ollie to be probably a little bit more penetrating by foot. But can we engage our halfbacks a little bit more? So Sard and Boyd, and when Williams comes back into the team. So that's pretty much a wrap for me. There was some, I'm not going to go through who was poor, but, guys like Brody Kemp just had a horror day. And who knows, he may have been affected by the fucking heat. And he was sort of like Benny Hill moments where he just sort of coughed the ball up. And, there's a few guys who were a little bit quiet on the day, probably didn't get as many opportunities. I thought our wingers worked really well to get back and fill in that dangerous space, but they didn't do a lot offensively. And in our front half, it's still a bit of a work in progress. I think Harry was a centimetre away from having an absolutely outstanding game. In fact, I think out of all the big key forwards on the ground, he was probably the most eye-catching. And let's not forget, the Geelong had Jeremy Cameron and Hawkins, and I was actually really impressed with the other big fella for the Cats. I think it was Neil, number 33. I thought he looks like a guy to keep an eye on moving forward. 204 centimetres. Big lump of a lad who caused us a few headaches in the air. But yeah, I thought Harry was on song, and I like the experimentation of playing him in the ruck. And are we going to have the balls to do it? Because I think we all know that Voss likes Pitnet. I think he likes Pitnet, and it's going to be a ballsy coach to say, nah, we're not going to play two genuine ruckmen. Because right here, right now, TDK is a genuine ruckman and not a forward. He just doesn't have the craft. He might be able to go forward occasionally, and he's a better option at Pitnet, but it just doesn't have the forward craft. So the Harry experiment to me is somewhat exciting, but do we want to necessarily sort of bang him up? But it could be. I mean, TDK is a fit young man. It could be something like 85 to 90% TDK in the ruck, and then Harry goes, into that spot. That leaves us a little bit short in our front half. But yeah, the new guys, I thought Fantasia. I don't want our new guy. Look, it's in February, and I know the season's just around the corner, but I don't want our new guys just to come in and, I don't want them to be as Sam Walsh. Sam Walsh was just a completely different kettle of fish. You could just see from the start that he was just going to be an absolute superstar. I don't necessarily want our new recruits to come in and go, oh, wow, they're fucking unbelievable. Next thing you know, they fall away. So I was relatively happy, comfortable with the game of Fantasia. I think just getting him through a full game of football, considering the injuries he's had, was a positive, and I thought he looked lively. And the combination of him and Motlop could be exciting moving forward. I thought Elijah Hollands did some nice things, and can he play a part as that high half forward. I think come round 3, he'll be the bloke that we want to look at in that spot. And I'm not getting too excited at the moment about Ashton Moyer. Now, 2 goals, one Joey Goose over the top, one fell in his lap. He moved around okay, but if we no Jack Martin, if we have to play him round 1 on the back of that type of form, and that, don't get me wrong, 2 goals is okay, but it's not like that is if we have to play Ashton Moyer round 1, an 18-year-old kid on the back of that type of performance, unless he comes out against Melbourne next week and really shines, then that's a different story. But that's probably more an indictment on us. And I know Jack Silvani's out, and we can't help injuries, but that's more of an indictment on us that we haven't invested a lot into that hybrid forward. And I looked at the VFL yesterday. Lemmy didn't do a lot. My boy Heath Ramshaw was easily, with Jackson Binns, the best player in the VFL yesterday. So there's an interesting one, guys. Although we didn't use that pick to replace Jack, it looks like we're going to wait to the mid-season draft. But I'll keep saying it. Heath Ramshaw, I reckon, has got his nose clearly in front in that race. If he keeps performing the way he did yesterday, won plenty of the ball and kicked 2 goals. But yeah, I'm a little bit afraid of playing the youngster Moyer so early on. I really am. But maybe that's all we've got. And if that's all we've got, then Jesus, don't expect a lot from the kid if we're going to be playing him early on in the season. Anyway, that's a wrap, guys. Tell me what you think. Were you happy with the performance yesterday? What do we need to improve on? Were you impressed? Can you see it? Can you see that type of performance challenging Brisbane in round 1 or whatever that's called, that opening round? Or are you just a little bit concerned about the start of the year, considering we do have Jacob Weitering out, considering there's no Jack Martin, considering there's no Sam Walsh? Do we have the depth to take on the best moving forward? Speak soon.